Goeiemôre almal teenwoordig. Namens die AI en Drakenstein Saakkamer wil ek graag diegene wat die moeite gedoen het om vanoggend se beraad by te woon, ten spyte van die gier en weeromstandighede, hartlik by Nantes Estate te verwelkom. Ek is oorweldig deur almal wat bereid is om oor hierdie saak by mekaar te kom en ek hoop dat daar gaan goeie vrugte daarvan wees. Ek verwelkom dan ook meneer en minister span wat ons gaan toespreek, Joanne en Lisa. Ons sien daarna om te hoor wat die Growth for Jobs initiatief vir ons verleiding inhou. Die Drakenstein munisipaliteit is ook sterk teenwoordig hier vandag. En ek sal ook graag opneem hoe ons 'n uitkomsgebaseerde alliansie met hulle kan vestig rondom vandag se inisiatief. My bestuurskomitee wat my so getrou bystaan en vir Fransis bystaan en die onlangs gevestigde advieskomitee verdien spesiale vermelding hier by vandag se verrigtinge. Welkom aan almal. Ek is oorweldig want die mense wat vandag hier is, party van is dokters, professors en ek dink dis oor die regte vlak waar ons hierdie probleem met aanspreek. So dat die nie net by praat kan bly nie en dat ons aksies kan kry. Ek handig hiermee bestuur aan Dr. Willie Silje, ons voorsitter van die AI Weskaap, wat die program verder sal lei. Dankie.
Welkom van die AI se kant af. Het is vir my voorreg om in die panel te wees en daar is al vir my gesê dat ek moet vir my, of hulle weet van 'n goeie eiendomsagent hier in die stad, menende dat ek vir my huisie moet opsit en ek moet my huisie man George verkoop en hier kom bly. Dis amper deesdae so dat ek elke week in die Kaap is. Nou vra hy vir my waar is jy dan nou? Nou ek is in George. Ek werk van George af, ek bly in Wildernis. Maar ons netwerk is so sterk, jy weet dat ons kan dit van George doen, maar ons het die laaste paar maande intensief seker gemaak dat ons by die mense uitkom, mekaar nie ook kan kyk. COVID het 'n groot leemte gelaat met hierdie persoonlike interaksies en ons is elke week in die stad, so as julle ons op 'n platform wil sien of gesprek 1 tot 1 maak die saak nie, ek sou bereid wees om dit enige tyd met julle te gesels. Die ding met die protocol observed, dis mos daar gaan Erwin, ja. Wil jy my iets sê, Erwin? As jy so gehoes het, wil jy iets sê, of iets so gehoes? Wil jy nie gehoes, jy weet so gehoes? Alle protocol observe. Ek hoor die storie van Soliman Msimanga, daai tyd was hy net die burgemeester van Tshwane geword. En toe is ons daar by 'n AI funksie in Pretoria en hy vertel die storie toe die nuwe raadslede nou vir die eerste keer op die platform kom. Die jong raadslid het ook gehoor van all protocols observed, jy weet. En hy het maar nie mooi geweet waarvoor dit nou staan of wat nou gebeur het. Nou ek gaan sy weergawe vanmôre vir julle gee. Miskien is ek aan die verkeerde kant as ek dit sê vanmôre. Maar in plaas van all protocol observed, you say all protocols observed. Yeah. Nou, there's a few here. Ek wil ook besonder vanmôre welkom heet aan die Sakekamer van Stellenbosch. Hulle bestuur is hier en ons het 'n hele paar gesprekke gehad met Stellenbosch en hulle is ook nou deel van die AI familie. So baie welkom hier, julle hoort by die AI, maar julle hoort 'n sterk Sakekamer die ek kan hier herhaal wat ek vir julle gesê het en ek gee die uitdaging vir julle dat in die geskiedenis van die AI was daar een keer naas George nou waar 'n ander Sakekamer die trofee ontvang het, is die beste Sakekamer van die jaar in Suid-Afrika. En dit was Stellenbosch. Ek stel die uitdaging vir Stellenbosch, wys vir ons dat julle Stellenbosch die beste kan maak. So baie welkom by die AI. Ek gaan graag net vra dat julle amptelike sertifikaat, lidmaatskap nou by my sal kom ontvang asseblief. En dan sê foto.
Op my lente spot.
Ja, dankie. Goed, en dan het ek ook COVID het 'n klompie sakekamers onactief gemaak, of amper glad nie actief gemaak nie, en ons kon ook baie goeie gestrekke met Mariesburg optel, en hulle het gehelp om weer te formaliseer, en het ingekoop op die konsep van die AAI. Ek het ook hulle sertifikaat saamgebring met die hoop hulle kan daar knaggie wees. So Dirk, ek gaan vir jou gee om te ry Mariesburg toe en dit vir die direksie van Mariesburg te gaan oorhandig. So vir ons is dit om weer op te bou na wat COVID afgebreek het. Nie dat die AAI en sy sake kom maar sonder uitdagings is nie. Nou ek noem hierdie voorbou ter aanleiding van die voorlegging wat die dat vanmôre vir ons gemaak, Grow for Jobs strategie. Nou, die twee dames, in die begin het ek hulle 'n bietjie verwar, jy weet, ek praat met Joanne en 'n gesig gaan sê ek Lisa vir haar. En as ek dan klaar die teams neergesit het, dan sê ek, maar dis nou wragtig, mos nie Lisa daai nie. Dis Joanne daai, dan moet ek nou terug gaan en verskoning vra vir my oversight. Maar nou kan ek hulle al uitken, en ek het hulle keer of 2 gaan besoek aflê, en hulle is letterlik daar langs die premier se kantore, jy loop so by die premier se wagloopie verby, en dan kom jy in hulle kantore in. So die premier het selektief 'n span gaan kies om hierdie hele Grow for Jobs strategiese plan vir die volgende 3 jaar en implementering op langer saam te stel, en ek was bevoorreg om as die AAI 'n klompie van hierdie gestreksessies by te woon, en ek dink die AAI in organisasie het al reeds besluit oor watter van daardie sleutelpunte in hierdie ekonomiese groeiplan gaan ons gebruik om deur middel van die sakekamers te implementeer. Onthou, hierdie is 'n vennootskap, en onomwonde is daar gesê, dit kan nie net regering blueprint wees nie. Hierdie is 'n gesamentlike blueprint en gesamentlike implementering. En ek versoek regtig elke sakekamer, en ons sal kom van die AI se kant af, waar 'n dorp of 'n stad sekere segmente het in hierdie groeiplan wat hulle kan implementeer, na vore sal kom. Maar ons is in die fase, en Joanne, en julle moet Joanne nou verskoon, jy weet, ek meen daar in die regering praat nie maklik Afrikaans nie. So today we're going to allow some English as well, if you don't mind, and Joanne will brief us on what is this Grow for Jobs all about. It's all approved now through government. I think we're on a point now that we decided it's time for implementation. What's next? We did a roadshow in the Garden Route with all those chambers there. I think there was 19 business chambers, 19 towns, part of the Garden Route. We also did it in Cederburg, Klein Willem, and Drakenstein asked me, but what about us? And I literally begged this lady, please, on this late stage, can we have another interaction with Drakenstein Soccercom? And now today we are here. They honored my request, so it's your turn, Drakenstein, Stellenbosch, and the surrounding area, Wellington, to listen on the program and give us some input. And this is, what to say, the business of the day. We know there's a lot of issues around us, personal issues, but the business of the day is Grow for Jobs. So she will do the presentation, and related to the Grow Job, you allow afterwards, which I will handle the question and answer session, where you can ask some questions and inputs. And those that Joanne can't answer right now, as I know, she will put on a mail afterwards and say, we thought about this is maybe what we should do. So don't be worried if there's no request or no feedback on your request, on your answer. They will come back to us, even through the HI or themselves, but let's stick to the business of the day, and that's Grow for Jobs. If you listen to what's happening this morning and last night with the Minister of Finance in his presentation, it's a is under severe pressure. I'm not sure what will happen with the budget, the medium-term budget, end of October, early November. Not sure about the date yet. But there's possible tax increases. They mention possible 2% increase on VAT and all those stuff. That also cutting government expenditure, that's government salaries. And immediately you see the trade unions said, no, it won't happen in South Africa. And he also mentioned the fact, the minister, that mentioned all the things. Bear in mind, there's also election next year. So to balance this in South Africa is tough. But let's see how every one of us, every chamber of us, can contribute to a success, firstly in the Western Cape, and the spin-offs from the Western Cape will be for sure in the rest of the country. But let's work together. That's my request this morning. So, Joanne, you are maybe a new face here, but I attended a lot of your presentations. I will still listen this morning. Thank you for you coming through to Drakenstein to come and bless us. And I'm 100% sure everyone will be excited what you tell us in a short version, because if you work through that whole strategy, we will need to overnight tonight. I've got a wife at home, so we can't do that. So there's time limits also, but warm welcome here in Paul.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And actually, can you hear? No, please. Firstly, the HI has been absolutely fabulous as we've been developing the strategy, and has made sure that we were able to interact via him with business to get the inputs as we were developing the growth of the job strategies I'm just going to present it. And also congratulations to the Stellenbosch Satterhammer. I think from a government perspective, and you can see it in the presentation, we placed a lot of emphasis on partnerships with business. And it always makes it easier when there's a unified voice of business that we're interacting with as opposed to individual. And that's where Satterhammers, AHI, Chambers Association start to play a really big role, so that we understand what businesses want as opposed to having to speak to each individual one. Because the other thing is, one of the things that I'm responsible for in the Department of Economic Development and Tourism is the research unit. And so every time we need to get feedback, we do a lot of surveys. And our observation has been that you may ask the same businesses a same survey, and the results change almost on a monthly basis, because obviously you respond to whatever the issue is confronting you in that particular month or that period of time. And so what we are looking at is regular, ongoing conversations to form a relationship, because having ad hoc once a year or once in a while meetings doesn't really help build that kind of trust that we are seeking between government and business. So congratulations to the Stellenbosch Satterhammer, and thank you very much for Willie. I think he's really been open, really been determined to actually form a relationship with the Western Cape government. And so I just want to express my appreciation to Doc for all his support and facilitation as well for interactions with business. Okay, so I believe I have about 45 minutes. I will aim to do it in a half an hour, but invariably I spill over. So I'll try and do it a little bit shorter than 45 minutes, because we do have a shortened version of the strategy, just 30 pages, Vinny. And there's a longer version of 200 pages. So I'll go through it as quickly as I possibly can, so that we can have as much interaction as possible and discussion afterwards about what does this mean and where are the areas of collaboration. Not we. It's not. So we go to the next slide. Yep, please. Done. Okay, again, yeah. All right. Increment. So, there's an opportunity space, and I think South Africans tend to be very hard on themselves. You have foreign businesses come here and think this is amazing. And then when you point out all the problems, they still think it's amazing. So we have quite a lot of opportunities, particularly here in the Western Cape. While we have really strong governance. So there's a governance index that normally gets analyzed and published. Oh, thank you. Never touch. Okay, I feel weaponized. So very strong governance. Western Cape generally in the government as well as municipalities are rated very highly. In fact, on the top level in South Africa with regards to management of government, finances, HR, stability, etc., etc. So I think we know that, right? The second thing is we have above average service delivery across South Africa. So Stats SA does a regular survey of citizens, and again, the Western Cape and all its municipalities come on top as far as service delivery is concerned. And this is like access to water, sanitation, even right down to grade on. How many kids are actually in early childhood learning centers? We have good roads, or good infrastructure access. We know that might not necessarily be quite the standards in terms of the gravel roads we know than some of the farmers want, but we have above average infrastructure. In fact, our roads are considered one of the top 3 in sub-Saharan Africa. Right? And there's other things as well. So broadband, 90% of our citizens have access to the internet relative to 77 in South Africa. And that's in part because the West Cape government actually invested in broadband in a way that enabled private sector to come on board. And so through the 1,593 Wi-Fi hotspots, 3 million South Africans have got access to data and internet. And it reflects in the figures and in the service delivery surveys that they conducted. Our unemployment is much lower than at the national average. Still high relative to international standards, 20% versus South Africa's 30%, 3-odd%. And we have unique investment and export opportunities. And they are quite unique. So, and some are national. The question is, are we fast enough to actualize them? But if you look at business process outsourcing, call centers more commonly known, we are the most favored region in the world for offshore BPO contact centers. We are considered to be the tech capital of Africa. We are the place where green economy corporates are headquartered in South Africa. And a little while ago, we were the fastest growing green economy in the world in terms of activity. We are considered to be UNESCO's design capital, one of the few design capitals in the world. And so, and then of course, if anybody again pays mind to the tourism surveys, we always consistently in the top 10 or number 1 as far as a tourist destination is concerned. We consider it the best events destination in the world. Right? We've got 2 of the top restaurants. There are 2 of the top 50 restaurants in the world is based here. And then we've got the best olive oil, we've got the best wine, we've got the best brandy as well. So we have all of these opportunities and we've done really, really well. The question is, how do we capitalize on it? Whoops. But we do have problems in the Western Cape. So we are part of South Africa. We benefit from being part of South Africa. So we're not looking for a cession. But whatever we do, we track the province, the national growth rate. So the last 10 years, South Africa grew at 1.2%. The Western Cape grew at 1.5%. And if you can see that graph is there. You see this graph over here, and you can see that the Western Cape tracks that of national. And while we've managed to actually grow employment, our unemployment has also grown. And that's in part because we're not growing enough employment. We're not growing enough employment because I think we nearly created 500,000 jobs over the last 10, 15 years. And so I think at the moment there's 2.7 million. But at the same time, the labor market has grown to 3.4 million. So basically, there are more people coming in than we are creating jobs. Push. So what we've done is essentially we've gone through this process of saying, okay, how do we grapple with this problem? One, we did a growth diagnostic that actually analyzed not only what our challenges are, because we keep maybe focusing on aspects of the challenge, but we also look at what our opportunities are. We had a whole set of a bunch of consultants that ran around, and I think certainly all of the regions and municipalities were consulted. So we understand that when we did the strategy, it was evidence-based. We went through then a process of doing a strategic framework, which basically was guided by policy and the inputs of the cabinet and the premier, which set out what we were going to achieve, our vision, our goal, the principles that was going to shape the strategy. And then we conducted the strategy. And it was a really intense process. Government likes taking forever to do a strategy. But we managed to do it in essentially 4 months. And that's where we used the entry points, such as HI, to reach out to business to find out actually what was going on, what was required, what were the needs were. And it also, which was a unique thing, is that it was developed through the entire economic cluster of the Western Cape government. And that's quite unusual because usually you outsource it. And then officials afterwards just realized this is the strategy, but this was actually co-developed with our Department of Infrastructure, our Department of Economic Development and Tourism, our Department of Agriculture, our Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, as well as our Department of Local Government. And so it basically harnessed the expertise, the knowledge base of all of these departments. And the important thing is it also ensures that when we implement, that there's buy-in, strong buy-in, and it should be responsiveness that builds experiences across all of those departments as far as the strategy is concerned. So our vision statement is that our provincial economy will achieve breakout economic growth, resulting in sufficient employment and opportunity, and an economy that is sustainable, resilient, diverse, and thriving, generating confidence, hope, and prosperity for all. The goal is that the Western Cape will be a R1 trillion inclusive economy in real terms. And the real terms is important because it basically means we can just sit and do nothing and inflation will take us to a trillion rand. So this is excluding inflation and growing between 4 to 6% per annum. And this is important because South Africa, I think only a very short period of time, just prior to 2008 or 2002, achieved anything near 4%. But we understand that that is important, and the reason it's important, it's important because it's important because for every 1% growth, GDP growth rate, 0.6% of jobs are created, employment is created. So for every 1% of growth, employment grows by 0.6%. So the problem historically in South Africa has not been that we've had jobless growth. It's that we have insufficient growth to generate the jobs that is required by our society. But we also understand that we can't grow unless businesses are confident that they can sell their products and services. And so the strategy really revolves around that, is how can we ensure and support businesses to grow? So I know that there's a thing where government and officials and sometimes politicians will come to government to businesses and say, how much jobs can you create? But I think there's an understanding that you would only start creating and employing more people when you're confident that your company's going to expand, that you're going to excel your products and services. And that's effectively what the strategy is all about. So it's a target strategy. And that basically means that we've got a list of interventions, but we want to be agile and flexible. And that basically means that there's 3 essentially time periods that we've got. And we also understand that some of the stuff that we're doing now, that's the correct thing, right? We're doing the right thing as long as it's aligned to the G4J. And so that's the first step. I will continue doing it. But there are new things that we need to do. We need to create the environment that enables for us to reach that 4 to 6%. And so we have essentially 3 time horizons. We can't predict what's happening in maybe 10 years' time, but we can start preparing for it. I think there's an understanding that, for example, we know that AI is going to be something. We need to start preparing. What are the opportunities for it? And I know there's lots of fears, but what does that mean for businesses? How do we support businesses to capture the opportunities and prepare for any of the risks? The principles underpinning the growth from the strategic framework, I'm not going to go through it all in the study. It does outline each of what these concepts mean, but maybe just to say, pull out a couple. One, it is really around the open market economy. And that for the leadership within the Western Cape means that they understand it's private sector that creates jobs and not government. The second is that it's about partnerships and cooperation. The video was quite correct. We are in a major fiscal crunch at this particular point in time. So yesterday I had to do a presentation to our cabinet about how we're going to respond to the fact that their budgets need to be cut. But the one thing is that South Africa's damn good at is managing through a crisis. We did really well during the drought, and there's a number of countries throughout the world that are now coming, the regions and cities that are experiencing all sorts of zero drought, and they have not been able to accomplish what we did in the Western Cape. So they're coming to us for best practice about how we managed it. And we did manage it well. The second thing is COVID. We did, again, manage the process really well under the circumstances. And so we do well in crisis. We come together because everybody's focused on the particular objective. It's clear what the objective is, and everybody works collaboratively in order to address it. So for me, the fiscal crisis is painful, but in itself, it represents opportunities to work in partnership with private sector. So when government has money, you don't have to speak to private sector for using, but when we don't have money, we're forced to actually look for partnerships and collaboration. And that's the way that I'm seeing the lens. The question is, what are those interventions? What are those projects? What are those opportunities that we can collaborate on? It's also about innovation, and then being responsive to impactful opportunities. So the one thing that the strategy doesn't do is it doesn't list sectors. And this is that has been quite tricky for officials not to do an analysis of sectors, particularly because one of my jobs previously was I was in charge of sectors in the department as well as in our national government. But the approach was like we call it being sector agnostic, which means that we may land up with sector opportunities, but let's not start there. Because the moment you start with these are the sectors that offer the most opportunity, governments a tendency to then try and pick the winners and say, we're only going to do what we're going to pick the best ones with around the resources to support everybody, and we're going to stick with that 3 or 4, however many is chosen. Which then means that if there are new opportunities that emerge, we aren't able to respond to it as government because now we've picked these 3. So the principle of being responsive to impactful opportunities means that if one of you come and say, listen, cannabis really is an amazing opportunity, we are able then to respond and say, okay, how can we support the issues of legislation, regulation, standards, or anything of the sort? And that's basically what it means. So government is actually open to any opportunities that potentially could be impactful for the economy. The 3 pillars, fondly known by some as a fidget spinner, looks at 3 core pillars, which is connected to the spatial economy. So the first one, which is probably the most important one for the Western Cape government, is an enabling environment. So we have to have an enabling environment. And that means, and that helps improve competitiveness, and it also helps in terms of the ease of doing business. You need to know that you've got your water, your electricity, the basic sort of utilities, that the regulations are efficient, etc., etc. But we're also looking at this, the accelerators of growth. And I'm sorry, but he's heard the story a bazillion times. I apologize, really. But once upon a time, I used to be a diplomat. And by the way, I still do the protocol observe thing, but I don't call it pretty ladies observe. Although I did notice that when he didn't look at me when he was saying that, he was looking at other people. But the accelerators, so when I was, and I was responsible for investment promotion and export promotion for a range of countries, Japan, Europe, and America at various points. So we used to kind of have this value proposition. At the time, we were 36th. We were ranked 36th in the World Competitiveness Index, which was not a bad ranking. At the moment, we're 60. But then we were 36th. We had, this is part of my sales pitch, 2nd cheapest electricity in the world. And we had a lot of electricity. Eskom was trying to get all these big energy gases to come to South Africa because they had a surplus. We had really efficient ports. But we still didn't necessarily attract the investment that we thought we should have. Right? So we weren't growing at the rate, despite the fact that we had what was considered an enabled environment. And also our water for our farmers was our biggest competitive edge. It helped make our farmers most competitive, particularly if you looked at the kind of incentives other countries were offering their farmers. We still were attracting growth. So I think the main point is that you can have an enabled environment, but you also need to support the growth, right? So if you spot an opportunity, how can government be involved? How can we collaborate to make sure that companies and industries are growing? So we do need to focus though. So essentially what's happening here is that we've identified 7 key priority areas for the immediate and medium term. I'm going to go through that in a little bit more detail. So, okay, so I didn't see this PowerPoint slide, but Lisa has swapped it around. I suppose she's bored of hearing my same song and dance. So we were trading around the economy, 46% GDP, and effectively one that's about driving investment. So private sector investment will be 20% of regional GDP. And this we understand as a symptom of confidence, right? So how confident is business to be investing? But at the moment, this business is investing like 12%. Okay, this is compared to our international colleagues or countries, where businesses on average invest 27%. So one could arguably say that maybe it's a little bit of a low ball target, but we understand it as a process. the value of stimulating domestic so it's about domestic markets and exports, where we are tripling the value of our exports, which is inclusive of tourism, by 2035. We believe we can do it, particularly if we sort out the issues of the Port of Cape Town. But this is, again, important for us. Energy resilience, this is probably the most, we understand this is the most binding constraint. There is a huge amount of effort on the provincial side to try and address this. But here we're looking at 1,800 to 5,700 megawatts to be generated in the Western Cape for the Western Cape businesses and citizens. And this will enable us to reduce reliance on Eskom. We are not looking to be independent of Eskom, though. But we need to be able to mitigate the impacts of load shedding, and so therefore we need to produce our own energy. Water resilience and security, so it's about doubling water security for tertiary and secondary sectors, and then honoring the water allocation commitments to farmers and agriculture. And this is probably, there was a hell of a lot of negotiations and arguments amongst the government departments to get to this. We understand that at the moment, 98% of our surface water is already being allocated. And so this is really, how do we get efficiency in the system? So, for example, the city of Cape Town, which is one of the largest consumers of water in the Western Cape, 60% of their citizens, of their households, use water, which basically means that industry is a very small component of water usage. And so it's how do we make sure that we can reduce demand and also increase supply through alien vegetation clearance, finding other ways to augment our supply. And then we have infrastructure and connected tech and innovation, which looks at quadrupling 30 to 35 the R&D that goes into the province, and then also venture capital deals which is 20 billion. And the venture capital is a proxy because we also understand that particularly in Stellenbosch, you look at the R&D from your innovation hub as well as the university has been amazing. And I think of all universities in the Western Cape, Stellenbosch is probably the most innovative and entrepreneurial about how it deploys its innovations. Not necessarily shared by some of its other studying universities, but it's really around how do we commercialize it? Because we have a lot of capital, R&D, patents, IP, but we don't necessarily successfully deploy it into the economy. So we don't benefit from that. In a lot of cases also, the IP is sold abroad. And so therefore, we don't even capture any job creation or economic value from it other than the sale of the IP. So for example, one of my bugbears is that the IP for lithium batteries was actually developed by CSIR in Victoria. We sold it to the Chinese. And they have a massive industry based on that. So it's really around how we can have innovations that are responsive to the needs of industry so that then it's better able to be commercialized. The state energy and geographic synergies is really important because here we have it's how do we land it geographically, and what has been really interesting has been the observation. I think Minister Vidal was quite passionate about this. So there's quite a lot of semi-immigration coming into the Western Cape at the moment. And these are not just, we're not talking about low-skilled or unskilled people, but a lot of professionals and businesses are looking to come and relocate to the Western Cape from other parts of South Africa. There is not a deliberate attempt for the Western Cape officials to go hunt these or encourage them, but I think just the circumstances of the way that the Western Cape is governed, it's kind of a pull factor as well as a push factor. Certainly, if anybody's gone to Job against in the state of their roads, you'd understand some of the push factor. But what has been emerging is really the opportunities for, and I'm going to talk about the Cape Winelands, because there's quite a lot of interest and opportunities that emerges from them. So you have things like the space economy, the tech economy that's arising. The issue around innovation, where there are two sectors in South Africa that do really well from innovation collaborations, where there's a strong relationship between industry, government, and the universities. One is in the health sector, and we can see what happens at UCT and Standard and Tygerberg hospitals. A lot of the, academic hospitals actually feed some of the innovations that then get applied in real life and in agriculture. Really amazing collaborations that see those innovations being relevant to the needs of farmers and the agricultural industry and gets applied, and then eventually gets commercialized, and actually the product or the service gets exported. And so that's what we see in terms of opportunities within the Cape Winelands, and how the strategy actually then lands in the particular municipality. So, okay, I am going to kill Lisa. They're going to take this totally. So this is just a little more detail on each of these. I'm not going to go into this. I've just gone through why it matters. But our interventions basically talk to what it's really around smart investment promotion, facilitation and support. So investment promotion, it's not one person, one entity, one organization that lands an investment. It's a team. It's a team made up of WISCRO, which is obviously the Provincial Investment Promotion Agency. It's a team that it comprises of government officials in the province, municipalities, but also business. So investors, both also domestic as well as foreign, as well as local, invest because they're confident and they're certain that they want it. And it's making sure that we are able to facilitate that as much as possible. Enabling competitive environment, visas at the moment is a major issue. And I'm not just talking about investor or business visas. It's like if you have a scarce skill and you can't access it, you should be able to bring people here to actually to support that. And then it's about what are the packages and support incentives and non-financial as well that can help make the business a little bit more successful, particularly at startup stage. Making sure that the necessary infrastructure is available. And then, of course, the one thing that came up quite strongly is a supply of affordable housing. This is perhaps, it's not just, it's quite acute, obviously, in the city of Cape Town, apparently less so for the Cape Winelands, but even there, it may provide opportunity for the district. Because what's happening is that because of the semi-immigration, the supply of housing is not keeping up, which is pushing up the cost of housing, which then starts to put pressures on the wages. And so we need to understand that there's a knock-on effect on the investment attractiveness with regards to that. And then, of course, it's the ecosystems collaboration, intelligent trading and trust. And this again doesn't just talk to foreign investment. This talks really to exactly what this forum is about. It's the collaborations amongst businesses, because I think what's emerging now in research, academic research, is the competitive edge that ecosystems provide to business to support and make them more successful. Because there's information sharing, but it's also tapping into various networks and understanding what those opportunities are. So companies don't have to relearn mistakes, but they can harness the experience of of people in the networks, both on an industry level and also on a spatial level. So with regards to exports in domestic markets, there is just one thing we've done really well, as far as our exports are concerned, notwithstanding the challenges in the Port of Cape Town. The one thing that is worrying us quite a bit is the increased concentration of exports in the agricultural space. So at the moment, our exports in the Western Cape kind of hovers between 46% to 55% in agriculture. That makes us actually quite vulnerable. If there's another drought, there's some weird thing that happens in the Port of Cape Town, it will hit our economy quite hard. And so what we do need to do is diversify and also maybe increase our specialization. So that's also a focus of how we're going to triple our exports. So it's, yes, we need to continue increasing our exports of agricultural goods, but we also need to diversify into other manufacturing and the tertiary sectors. So we're going to be looking at enabling competitive export environment that looks at, yes, there's the thing about air access, making sure that people have access to, if you need to export via air, but it's also around tourism. And then it's freight logistics, which for us is the big binding concern in this particular PFA. And then, of course, it's how do we enhance supportive compliance infrastructure and regulation. So if you need certificates, an export certificate, in order to export to a particular country, that's also a government starts to pay on. It's strengthening and diversifying the export base, as I said earlier. And then it's about how do we drive market access. So there's a lot of emphasis also on Africa, with its 1.2 billion people. That's going to be the biggest, I don't know, not country, but as a collective market, it's going to be the biggest market in about 20 years' time. And it's really how do we start leveraging it, because that's actually where our competitive edge is. It's we are part of the continent, and it is quite fragmented now, but through the African Free Trade Agreement, over time, that is going to start resolving itself. And we need to understand that a lot of foreign corporates tend to take a long-term view. So again, when I was doing investment promotion a gazillion years ago, corporates were going into China. Yes, they kept saying they were cheap, but they were very uncompetitive in a large respect. And foreign corporates, particularly US and European countries, who lose tons of money every single year in China. But they weren't there for the cheapness of the products. They were there so that they could position themselves. When China started to grow, they were part of the market and they could capture the market. And so there is going to be a point where our networks and our relationships with African countries is going, if we invest in it, the time in it, will also stand us in good stead. Is anybody from the university here? Okay. So when we talk about class selling opportunities, and I'm not quite sure if any wine farmers, I mean, this is a really beautiful venue. But leveraging cross-selling opportunities is really around, if you own a shop, you go into the shop, you come in there for your milk, but you end up with a basket of other stuff. So that's what we will need to apply here with cross-selling opportunities. You come in maybe as an academic, a student, a researcher, a tourist, and you leave an investor, a buyer, an advocate, an ambassador a brand ambassador of the Western Cape. And that's what we mean by cross-selling opportunities. So this is what Singapore used to do. So they used to train they used to give courses to their taxi drivers. So this was obviously before Uber and all of that. But so you then, like when I used to travel abroad, I used to, like, your best source of information is the taxi driver, because he's going to say it like it is. But what they do, gave to taxi drivers the whole spiel. So the taxi driver was able to say, this is the opportunities, this is how well we were doing. And when, bang out in Singapore, because there are challenges there, being part of a non-democracy that they are. But essentially, they understood that they were part of the sales force. And so it's how are we leveraging these opportunities for the Western Cape. Energy resilience. Western Cape Winelands is certainly well placed in a whole number of respects. The municipality of Stellenbosch is helping them be the first one to beat the shedding and generate its own electricity through private sector IPP. And so there's a lot happening at the moment. So one way is issue on making sure that our services are still operational when there is load shedding, in particular that starts hitting the higher stages. It's really around how do we reduce demand, right? So at the moment, we're not really encouraging people to reduce electricity demand despite the load shedding. And we're starting to just switch off freezers like they were previously. And that is a way to say, given the shortage in supply. It's strategic development. So we're looking at an integrated resource plans that gives a good understanding of the private sector around what the plans are so that companies can respond and plan accordingly. It's really around how do we create the environment that allows for procurement. And this is from private sector to private sector in terms of supply of energy and electricity, but it's also about how municipality is able to procure from IPPs. And then it's around the maintenance and expansion of required infrastructure. So that really talks about our challenges within the transmission grid. If you look at the problem in South Africa and in the Western Cape particularly is that we have constrained transmission grid. So one of the things that I do when I'm not Chief Jane is I'm responsible or was responsible for energy. So we're driving the municipal energy resilience plan. And as part of that, we were doing, we did a study, a request for information. We were doing the business case around how municipalities can actually do the procurement as quickly as possible. And we wanted to understand what the pent-up demand was. And there's 8 gigawatts of potential electricity that could be supplied. Private sector has these projects, but they cannot actually set them up because they cannot access the transmission grid because of the constraints. And so the strategy now is really around how to utilize the distributed networks and grids, because that would be a short-term solution while Eskom is trying to sort out increased capacity on the transmission lines. We've seen a lot of the frameworks that's required. So nearly all our municipalities have trade feed-in tariffs, which is, I think, only 1 or 2 municipalities outside of the province has it. Nearly all of ours have it. And so we've already developed the regulations that allow us to have even a virtual power station from citizens and households, rooftops, etc., etc. So we've invested quite a lot of effort in that and actually helped develop and shape what's happening at national level as well. And then, of course, there's a lot of opportunities in for growth for energy. So we predict, depending, of course, whether you wait for solar PV or wind, that there's opportunity that in itself will generate between 20 to 70 billion rands worth of investment in the next 12 years. And so how do we make sure we capture as much value of that? So we don't import everything, but where we're competitively able to manufacture along with value chain. And then there's other really wonderful opportunities like hydrogen, which is a potential source to replace oil. This is more of a replacement for oil and petrol rather than energy. And hydrogen needs 2 things. It needs energy, electricity, i.e. renewables, and then needs water. That's it. And South Africa, and particularly Western Cape, is well placed as far as those that is concerned. Or maybe not so much water, but it allows for desal. But if you look at desalination, 60 to 70% of desalination costs, operating costs, is electricity. So if you combine renewables to supply the desal plant, you suddenly reduce that quite considerably. Okay. Water, it's again about doubling the amount of water available to industry and then also to agriculture, secure that amount. And this is really just about how do we make and augment supply, how do we reduce demand, how do we better coordinate, and how do we assist municipalities come up with alternative water financing models. Because at the moment, the biggest sources of revenue is water and then electricity. So it almost kind of incentivizes people to use municipalities to sell more water, because if they don't, their revenue drops. And so we have to find alternative models for them. And then, of course, infrastructure maintenance, so make sure that we don't have leakages. The Western Cape actually does reasonably well on this. So there's an estimated between 7 to 17% water is lost to leakage. That's equivalent to a dam or two. But if you look at England, they have something like a 60 to 70% water leakage. Right? So it's okay when you have a lot of water going through your pipes, but they also starting to experience these droughts, these periods of no rain, which is impacting. Sorry?
Bad water, Joburg, be 30 and 50% water loss.
Cheers.
This morning.
Oh. There you go. Good governance in the Western Cape. Tech and innovation, I spoke a little bit about this before. And here we're basically looking. Lisa says there's a gremlin in the presentation. This is actually quite useful for people that are interested in theory of change. So this is really because government as a theory has been quite short term. So for all of the priority focus areas, we developed a theory of change. And the theory of change is to say, if that's our goal, what do we have to do now? What are our change strategies? What would be the medium-term impact? And then what would be the long-term results? So you follow through the logic of where and how you're going to get to the goal. With tech and innovation, it's about the ease of doing business and promoting the ecosystems. And it's particularly important in the innovation space because it's an intangible IP. Essentially, knowledge is intangible. And so that's why the ecosystems are all more important. We have stimulate growth and demand of innovation and tech startups and scale-ups. Some massive advantage, again, the Cape Winelands, both in the Drakenstein as well as the Cape Stellenbosch area has opportunities to leverage off the university and capitalize off that. Establishing Western Cape as the venture capital hub for startups and scale-ups, as well as supporting human capital. And that becomes quite important because innovation and tech is all about know-how. I can go into this in any amount of detail if you wish. So the thing about the infrastructure and connected economy is really about how we make sure that the infrastructure is responsive to the needs and enables. And our department, the big stuff is the process of actually finalizing the infrastructure framework. But the one thing we picked up is that when the infrastructure experts do the projections around what the demand is and what kind of infrastructure we do, they do a projection around what they think the population growth is going to be. They do a projection around what they think the economic growth is going to be. And they always use the historical trends. So if we have grown by 1.2% over the last 20 years, that is what they factor into their infrastructure projection, which means that if we need to grow faster, they need to accommodate that increased growth. So that basically companies can then know that there's sufficient infrastructure to cope with the expansion. And so that's what this is all about. And it essentially commits government to spending 10% of the contribution, growth, fixed capital formation contribution to GDP. And at the moment, we are something like 3%. And possibly with the fiscal cuts, there's additional pressures. And that's partly what I presented yesterday to Cabinet to say we need to protect and reinvent this for growth, for jobs. So this is really around, again, a lot of emphasis around planning and strengthen the ecosystem. We see a lot there about partnerships with private sector, how government can better leverage its assets. It's about ease of doing government, and that's really important. That's not a typo, because often officials find it, very difficult to partner because of the regulations not compliant. And so it's how do we make it easier so that we can be compliant but still allow for those partnerships. Harnessing digital and hybrid infrastructure, I touched on that earlier, and then it's all about logistics and mobility. We understand that mobility is more a challenge in the city of Cape Town, but given the fact that what is emerging is essentially the lines economically and in terms of population are starting to blur between Stellenbosch and city of Cape Town, which means that there's better coordination that's going to be required. And then, of course, a lot of emphasis around addressing the challenges of the Port of Cape Town and in the other ports as well. Almost done. So this is my favorite slide or picture in the G4J, because I think it clearly explains as far as improved access to employment and economic opportunities, what the challenge is. So this picture, you can't see it so well, shows where the lights are or yellow is where the economic activity is happening. There is this picture shows where people live. So there is a massive difference, and that's the major challenge that we're experiencing as far as mobility is concerned. People live far from the economic opportunities. That also places a lot of risks for businesses, because while employees take 3 to 4 hours to travel, okay, that's not the problem in Stellenbosch so much and in the Cape Winelands, but people take a long time to travel. It's expensive, and so that's not to affect productivity. Also, very available when there are things like that taxi strikes, where there was a 50% absenteeism because of the strike. So the strategy is one. Can we just go back? So I'm going to read out the goal because it makes a bit more sense then. All citizens who want to be economically active have improved access to economic opportunities and employability through at least one pathway. And the pathways identified are improved employability assets. Do they have the skills, do they have the competencies that they require? Do they have career management skills? Do they have workplace ready capabilities and skills? Are they on time? Are they disciplined? Can they work in teams? Can they communicate? The issue around the career management skills is that there's a 50% dropout rate of first-year students at universities. Part of that is financial, it's very complex, but certainly part of one of the top reasons is because kids made the wrong career choice. Well, that can prove to be quite costly for the universities, but also costly in terms of talent being lost and not directed properly. And then, of course, you have economic opportunities bringing, as I was saying earlier, given the cost of mobility and public transport, with the reliability of public transport, is also can we bring economic opportunities close to where communities live. And we've certainly seen that emerge in the Khayelitsha, just an area with the BPO and the call centers, is by saying all of the call centers at the moment is in the city of Cape Town, in the CBD. So then they have these taxis having to take the kids, the young employees back and forth. If they actually, and most of them actually come from the flats, the Cape Flats. So if you put a call center in the resource plane, you're easily able to access those opportunity, the workplace, and your costs, both for the employee and the employer, actually reduce. And so that's how we intend to bring it closer, not in an artificial way, it's not like putting an SEZ next to a township, but it's really around how we harness it. Because the other issue, just before COVID, we have a Benwas Bond Center that we helped establish and support in Kailita. And there are 70 entrepreneurs that were incubated, tech entrepreneurs. The idea was that they would graduate so that we could take the next cohort of entrepreneurs coming through that could get the support, right? We couldn't graduate them out because there was no business infrastructure in the townships for them to graduate to. And we did the investigations and discovered that for commercial property, in Kailita costs a person 500 Rand a square meter compared to a third of the price in the brand new F&B building on the foreshore city of Cape Town. So there's a massive difference, and that's in part because of the lack of business infrastructure. And that's really then about how do we actually start building and how do we reduce the risk? Why is private sector not branding? What we need to do to reduce the risk for private sector actually doing that? So it looks at improved workplace skills and productivity. It looks at education. So we're working very closely with the Department of Education with regards to this. In fact, they lead this particular priority focus area. Working with universities, we've re-engaged now with Tech again. But certainly Professor Eugene Kuto has been an active part of developing the strategy and providing input anyway. Bringing economic pathways and opportunities closer, as I said earlier, to the communities and vice versa. Enhancing entrepreneurship pathways. We don't rank very highly when there's a global GEMS monitor. And South Africa is always ranked down there at the bottom. And I think we all instinctively know that South Africans are very entrepreneurial. That's why whenever they go abroad, they are kind of really sought after workers because we always think out of the box. We always try to find a way to make it work. So we are entrepreneurial in mindset. And so therefore the question is the problem the fact that there's a lack of enabling environment and culture? And then lastly is again all about coordination in the ecosystems. So we are at the moment now, we've just identified a core set of interventions. We've asked for inputs from our enterprise to say which ones are the ones we need to concentrate on, because there's about 150. We can't do everything immediately. We need to sequence them properly, which are the ones that we have to focus on. And particularly now because of the fiscal constraints, we certainly need to reduce perhaps the number. But let us look at the ones that are flagships, are catalytic, that will really make a difference to the broadest group of businesses possible. And so we have these sets of projects. And so the question is, can we secure partnerships and collaboration in the implementation of? And I think that the reason why partnerships, and I'm not around money, I'm also because you can do things also without necessarily throwing a hell of a lot of money at it. But I think the relevance for government is that we know if private sector is wanting to engage and work with us on a particular intervention, it has resonance with them, it has relevance for them, and it's important to them. And so that's why we kept them, I think, through Vinny, and I think he has been engaging, is like all those interventions of which are the most important. They've been informed by businesses. So all of that list, which ones do we have to concentrate on? Because then we know that we're focusing in the near term on the right ones, the ones that matter to business. Okay, so with regards to the municipalities, we're looking to work with the municipalities so that we are aligned. That's important for business. And we also understand that for most businesses, as well as particularly citizens, it's then difficult to distinguish between a municipality and what they're supposed to do provincial government and national government. And so you were looking to collaborate where possible with municipalities and also where relevant with government. And then between government and private sector, it's collaboration, the partnerships. And again, because we've done this across our economic cluster, we can bring, it's not just my specific department that I represent, but it's across the board. And it's really around how do we mobilize the business community. So I'm not going to go through these slides. Thank you.
I listened to this presentation, there's some new stuff coming out. And just to refer back to my engagement met landbou verlede week by Nantes. En ek wil hierdie slide vir jou lees, want dit is nie oor gaan die bouwe, gaan dit anders. In die woorde van Henry Ford sê, coming together is the beginning. Keeping together is purpose. Working together is success. So I think it's time that we really work together. And I know that Drakenstein Chamber of Commerce is doing a hell of a job. I'm briefed on a daily basis about your team, your subcommittees, your focus areas, and I can see something will happen in this area now. Van perspectief het ons al reeds besluit, en ek het dokument nou weer gelees, besluit wat gaan die as prioriteite aanpak om hierdie plan te help implementeer. Daardie prioriteite van ek in 'n werksdokument omsit binne die AAI en vir sakekommers gee en sê dis hoe ons sien hoe ons deel gaan raak van 'n hele groot plan hoe hy geïmplementeer kan word. Maar ek dink die sakekamer en Stellenbosch nie julle nou hier moet ook na die plan gaan kyk. Het spesifiek vir hele areas waar daar ander kundigheid of behoeftes mag weeg ook sê in hierdie plan wat gaan ons ook op aanvat van ons kant af om dit te maak werk. Maar laat ons op die einde van die dag saam moet werk. Dis onaanbodig. Ons moet saamwerk om 'n sukses hiervan te maak. Hierdie week by Nampo in die gesprek het Agri Weskaap besluit om 'n landbou besigheidskamer te vestig. Nie in 'n sakekamer formaat nie, maar in 'n netwerk waar ons kan saamwerk. Nou, as daar een plek is waar landbou en sakekamers moet saamwerk, dan is dit hierdie area. En julle lede moet ook Agri Weskaap se lede wees. Want so gebeur dit in die platteland. Ons deel lidmaatskap. Toe ons deel platforms. Toe ek sukkel in Prins Albert om 'n sakekamer daar te vestig, wat jy sit met hierdie harde tradisionele Engelse mense wat kom van die buiteland af, wat daar kom vestig, wat hulle eie CM's het, dan sit jy met die ou Afrikaanse besighede, jy sit met die formele sektor, en vir hoeveel jaar sukkel ons, net om hierdie ouens om dieselfde tafel te kan kry. En toe ek landbou betrek, ek vir Janie Strydom vra, kom saam met my, kom ons gaan spreek, besighede toe daag daar 140 van hulle op. En met die gesaamtelike stem wat ons kon kry as die AAI en as landbou, kon ons daai middag in Sakekamer vestig met 'n bestuur, met 'n voorsteur en hulle is in die werk. Hulle naam is Swartland Sakekamer, Swartberg Sakekamer. Meen in die berg waar daar werk. So daar's baie krag om saam te werk om hierdie goed te maak werk. Ja, en dan net in terme van die skole. Julle wonder hoekom is my werk so vol baie praatjies vandag. Ek sit ook in 'n sakekamer, George, die voorste van George Sakekamer vir 15 jaar. So ek weet wat is dit om in 'n sakekamer te bedryf. Dis harde werk, dis speletjies. En met die laaste netwerk geleentheid by Verkoop, toe ek my oog op as skoolhoof wat daar in die gehoor sit, maar ek weet hy het al aangesluit by die sakekamer. En ek wou die vraag vir almal vra. Ek vra dit van myself, jy kom wil 'n skool kan deel word van 'n sakekamer netwerk. Jy kom wil jy 'n lid word van 'n sakekamer. En ek het hom die microfoon gegee, sê jy het antwoord. Hy sê, wat die? Ons het 'n belang in die toekoms van die land. Ons sit met die kinders in ons hande. Ons moet weet waar toe gaan hierdie land. Ekonomies gewys. So, hierdie interlock netwerk is so krities belangrik. Ek weet skole moet die hele betrokke raak. Stellenbosch en Parel. Ons moet regtig ons toeligte op mekaar sit. Ons moet seker maak. Een keer 'n maand het ek 'n gesprek met die distriksonderwys streek daar by ons. Ek moet die senior personeel toespreek oor verskeie onderwerpe. Ek wil vertel wat die ekonomie aangaan. Ek moet vertel in terme van vraagstukke oor entrepreneurskap, klein besighede. Die vraag is aan my gevra, maar hoe kan die AAI saakkamers help om entrepreneurskap nie 'n vak te maak wat jy moet slaag met 'n tikmerk nie, maar 'n praktiese ervaring waar die kind op skool reeds kan demonstreer dat ek kan fisies entrepreneur wees, deel van 'n produk of 'n diens wat ek kan lewer terwyl op skool sit. Maar daardie leier moet kom van die sakekamers af. Julle moet koppel, engage, hoofonderwysdepartement in julle streek, seker maak julle het verbind. Nie dat julle dit nie, maar dit moet 'n sleutelarea word. So die taak van die sakekamer gaan net al groter en groter en groter word. En dan maar vir die netwerk wat ons moet vestig. Ons is almal een doel. En ek gaan daarmee my preek afsluit en dan gaan ek die vrae antwoorde vir julle oopmaak om vir jou en 'n paar vrae te vra. Ek word baie die vraag gevra, wie is in sakekamer se aandeelhouers? Sakekamer het nie aandeelhouers nie. Sakekamer het lede, want dit is 'n non-profit organisasie. 'n Non-profit organisasie het nie aandeelhouers nie. Vraag is, wie is die stakeholders? Is dit die lede van die sakekamer? En die stakeholders is daar oor vanaand gaan wonder waar in sy bordkos vandaan kom. Wat die geleentheid het om iets te kan doen. En ons sal daai laaste sewende vlak, daai opportunities gaan ons moet ontsluit. Ons gaan dinamies moet ontsluit. Ons gaan ons besighede moet groei. Ons gaan ekonomie moet groei waar daar 'n werkskep gaan word. Maar ook entrepreneurskap as 'n werklikheid maak. Nie as net 'n wens vir denkery nie, as 'n werklikheid waar ons kan seker maak ons kan vir mense geleentheid skep. Hierdie sukses van entrepreneurskap is nie altyd baie groot nie. Maar ten minste het ons mense geleenthede gegee. Al begin ons net met opleiding, want ons tans nou met George doen. Ons het gepraat met Dirk, die AI se programme gaan binnekort volgende jaar uitgerol weer waar geleenthede geskep gaan word. Hier sakekamer vir die opleiding van entrepreneurs. En dan die volgende vlakke wat gevolg moet word. Hoe koppel ons daai entrepreneurs nou weer vas in jou sakekamer en jou netwerk waar jy ons geleentheid kan kry vir groei. So, my stoetjie verwant tot asseblief kom ons verbind mekaar, kom ons koppel. Kom ons hier ons ervaring. Ek ken toe ek vir Erwin Swelle, professor Erwin Swelle gaan sien, waar was dit? Reggevallei nie. En ek het hom gesê, Erwin, weet jy, ons is die AI, kort een ding, ons kort intelligensie. Met ander woorde, ons moet weet wat die ekonomie doen, en waartoe hy gaan. Ons kan nie wag vir regering nie. Hulle het inligting. Maar ons het intelligensie kan by mekaar maak by ons mense, ons het gebruik, ons het dit deel met die regering, ons strategiese planne. En ons kort so iemand binne die AI, en ek nie eens skaam geen plaat te praat. Hy sê, wil jy, ek is in. Ek is daarmee vertel. En dit is wat ek sê, leierskap is teken. So, asseblief, kom ons sit ons kop in en ons kom ons werk.